Take 2.
It's been about 3 years since I moved to Seattle and dove into street photography. Now, prior to my move, my photography skills were probably like okay at best. And definitely my attitude was more stubborn because I don't know, it was just, I felt I was more stubborn when it came to trying to improve my skills. Now, in reality, I think that stubbornness stemmed from just not wanting to be disappointed with the realization of how much I didn't know. However, that little bit of fear that I had ended up being a hindrance and a motivation. So I guess the main question would be why I went into street photography. My main reason was because street photography was just an easier category to get into because it just focused on capturing the moment of a certain time and place. It didn't require much equipment and there weren't really any location limitations. It also didn't really require any subject interactions. I could essentially just be in my own little world and focus on capturing that moment in time. So when I travel to a new city, I find that street photography is just a great way to get acquainted with your city as both a tourist and as a local. You get to understand the notions from the tourist perspective of what makes this area fun, but you also get to understand what the locals go through or what they enjoy. Now, one note that I've been giving new photographers as to why street photography is easier to get into, it's because it's a little bit more forgiving when it comes to mistakes or technical flaws. I've run into a lot of issues where my subject that I intended to capture ends up being slightly out of focus or ends up not being the main focus at all. And in a way that's kind of accepting because it's a little bit more authentic to just that moment in time. Now, having said all that, I do tell these new photographers that it is an easy category, but it's the hardest one to master. Early in my ventures, I would just focus on capturing anything. I didn't really take the time to compose my images and isolate certain subjects. I'd capture stuff, but it was just nothing to really post or write home about. Now, this next point is going to sound a little contradictory, but the other difficult part about street photography is just not being technically pristine. I said that street photography is a bit more forgiving when it comes to mistakes or just things not being aesthetically pleasing, but you should still be knowledgeable of your camera and exposures. I remember early on, I spent more time fumbling with my camera, and by fumbling with my camera just so I can get the right exposure, I ended up screwing up and missing the shot completely. And even if I got all the technical aspects right, like my exposure looked great, the focus was on point, the only thing that was lacking is just the composition. It just took some time to really understand my gear and exposures so that way I could focus more on the composition and the story. The final hurdle of street photography is getting over the nerves of taking photos in public. Moving to Seattle, it gave me a fresh start, and since I didn't have a job lined up, I spent most of my time wandering the city and I took my camera along with me. It got me used to just taking my camera along and taking photos in public without feeling self-conscious about what other people were thinking. Nowadays, it's always funny that whenever I go to some location or an event without my camera, I feel very vulnerable and naked about it, and I get very anxious when I start to see a particular shot that I really like. Sure, I could use my iPhone camera to take the photo, but there's just something more satisfying taking a photo with an actual camera. Now, if you're trying to break into street photography, moving is definitely not going to be the most conventional thing to do. For me, it was a different story. I mean, it was just the perfect storm. I was brand new to a new city and didn't have a job, so I spent like at least an hour every day taking my camera out and about, so that way I could practice my technical skills. I was able to get over some of the nerves of being out in public with my camera, and it just gave me a new perspective of the place I lived. Even when I go back to my hometown, I am able to look at the city in a different way because it's just part of the triggers that I built up in myself. Because after a while, you grow to just say, oh, it's always there, and you know, it's a touristy spot, I don't want to go. Yeah, it's a touristy spot, but there's something charming about it. So if you are in a creative slump or trying to break into street photography, just take the opportunity to look at the ordinary and find a new perspective about it. Now, I know this video is probably all over the place. I'm very rusty with these videos since I haven't done it in a while, but I thought it would be nice to just start, making these videos again. In the end, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit more perspective of what my photography journey has been like, and hopefully it might inspire some of you guys as well. So until next video, see ya.